I'm no expert here. I struggle with this a lot. I'm still struggling with this as I speak to you today. And it's slowing down when instinct wants to push, to be patient when your mind wants immediate results. I'm used to measuring progress in miles run or weights lifted, but now I need to reframe how I measure progress. And as I reflect on that, I think it's a lesson for everybody that life is going to throw disruption at all of us, that real skill isn't necessarily rushing forward. It's in recalibrating, listening, and showing up in small intentional ways. And, as I say this, I wrote my thoughts down before this recording. And admittedly, this is stuff that I all really still struggle with. I'm not okay slowing down. I'm not okay feeling like I can't. But admittedly, I've learned a lot about how important it is these last couple of days. And as someone who has a lot of faith, I do have faith that the patience will pay off. Welcome to the Mile 40 podcast. I'm your host, Bishoy Tadros, the author of Break Barriers and Audacious. And I invite you to join me as I engage with guests to discuss those bounce back moments that we encounter on our personal journeys. Mile 40 is a forum to learn about how athletes, professionals, and leaders of all backgrounds stare down moments in life where the only option is to rise up. The Mile 40 podcast strives to remind listeners that the comeback is always greater than the setback. Welcome back to the Mile 40 podcast. I'm your host, Bishoy Tadros. If you haven't already, please be sure to hit subscribe if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. Check out the show notes, pick up a copy of Break Barriers or Audacious. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Mile 40. This is a solo episode that I wasn't planning to record. But after the last week, if you've been following on social media and you had reached out, I felt it was important to share. I wanted you guys to know what was going on physically, mentally, and emotionally. And the reason was I do feel like by sharing, I can give perspective on what it's like when your body, your routines, your sense of control, they suddenly get challenged. And maybe if nothing else, you walk away from this seeing something about yourself in the process. The past week for me has been a lesson in fragility, patience, perspective. And I'll take you back to the scene and kind of help bring you in, the room and understand what went down every step of the way. So I'm recording this on Saturday, January 10th. The event happened last Saturday, January 3rd. Like any other Saturday, woke up, had a protein-packed breakfast. I was actually really excited about my workout. And I call that in particular because the period of working out for me between, let's call it mid-November through February, maybe end of January, I get to really focus on my strength work. I'm not in the middle of marathon training. For me, strength was never a strength, for lack of a better expression. And a lot of times when I'm, in the crux of marathon season, my speed work would outdo some of the strength that I had built. And so they were always kind of counteracting against each other. So this period is pretty sacred for me, especially over the years, because it wasn't an overnight progression, but as the years have gone on, I've been able to build more and more strength, which I was particularly proud of. And we were really seeing momentum, myself and my trainer. So about 5 minutes into the workout last week, I did a warm-up set of hex deadlifts, and then I began my first set post warm-up. And I lifted the bar, and as I was coming up, I immediately heard and I felt the pop that, you never want to hear and feel. And you read about it, you see it happen to other people, but you never think it's going to happen to you. And quite frankly, that's kind of how I always thought about it. I thought it would never happen to me because, I'm not lifting ridiculous amounts of weight. But instantly I fell to the ground. My trainer was right there. He was calm. He coached me through the breathing. A short while after, he tried to help me up. And I took 2 steps, but immediately I felt a rush of nausea, lightheadedness. I thought I was going to faint. It was very terrifying as it was happening in real time. And I immediately had to go back to the ground. And I was pretty scared about what that meant. But later, the doctors clarified for me. They told me it was a normal response, that my nervous system was reacting to the trauma. Um, my trainer then called 911. Before the ambulance arrived, he called Christine to let her know what was happening. I wasn't really paying too much attention while that was going down. And so I can only imagine how that call must have landed for her. And eventually the medics and the police officers arrived, and they had asked me if I could, lift myself up, and I couldn't. And, I was starting to realize that this was a severe situation, but I was unaware of what that meant exactly. And they had to bring the board to slide me on in order to bring me into the ambulance. And that was a little surreal because everything was both slowing down and speeding up at the same time. The movement, the medics were asking questions, everything felt distant. It kind of felt like it was happening to someone else, but there I was as it was happening. I had my phone on me in the ambulance as I was lying down, and I called my dad, and I started the call by saying, don't tell mom. And, I think a lot of times we deflect to humor. And sometimes when you do that in the middle of chaos, it shows essentially how protective we are of each other, and how we try to control what little we can, especially when we feel powerless. And in those moments, a little clarity hit me. Life can change really quick. What I had taken for granted, walking, moving, even just feeling steady in your own body. There was a lot of uncertainty. And it wasn't about running or lifting in particular, it was about independence, control. And that perspective forced me to confront something pretty universal. And it was the fact that the things that we define ourselves by, they're fragile. The routines, the skills, the daily actions that we take for granted. One small event can make them fall really out of reach, and that's what was happening there. And throughout all of it, the one question that kept running through my mind is, when am I going to be able to run again? When am I going to be able to move freely again? And it wasn't necessarily in terms of races or workouts, but even just to walk normally, to feel like myself, to have control over my own body. And that question is something that I think that everyone can relate to, even if you haven't been injured. Uh, you remember that life has a way of interrupting plans, of challenging your identity, and testing essentially what we thought was certain. The quote goes that you make plans, and God laughs. And so eventually I got to the ER, and one of the first things that they asked me to do was to lift up my legs. And to my dismay, I realized I couldn't. That I could barely move either of my legs. And that was another terrifying moment, that I feared that I had lost some function. And that fear really hits you hard and fast, and your mind kind of races there. But this wasn't something that the doctors haven't seen before. So over the next 2 to 3 hours, they gave me the steroids, the muscle relaxers, the pain medication, and over time, my mobility returned, and I was able to walk, fully normally again. And I was exchanging calls with Christine, and I remember this, and she'll love that I'll share this. But once she found out that I could walk again, the first question she asked me was, do I have time to finish my hair before I come? And, now I laugh it off, but it was that combination of fear, relief, levity, moments of vulnerability sometimes go hand in hand with, I don't know, some of life's absurdities, for lack of a better expression there. But, now as I reflect on this, first and foremost, a lot of gratitude. I'm thankful for the doctors, the ER staff, my trainer, people who stayed calm under pressure. And, their calmness allowed me to remain as calm as possible, despite the fact that, inside my head was definitely racing. And the most gratitude really for the fact that this wasn't something worse. I walked out under my own power. And that's really what's been grounding me all week. So, Leaving the hospital was a relief, but it was also a reality check. Your body feels capable, but your mind starts racing. Every step, every small discomfort, everything kind of becomes a question after that. You're asking, is this normal? Am I doing too much? Am I going to hurt myself again? And even with gratitude, there's a little bit of grief. And that grief is for the temporary loss of something that, in my case, defined part of my identity. And for me, that's running, lifting, the rhythm of training, the sense of control I get from moving my body in a way that I really enjoy and that I love. And it's not just physical, it's emotional. And it's how we regulate stress, it's how we process fear, it's part of who we are. And when that's threatened, your nervous system deregulates. Anxiety spikes, restlessness sets in, sleep and focus shift. Um, the body's essentially protesting. And I recall the first night or two after the incident, I told Christine that I couldn't sleep because my mind was just racing around, what is happening? What have I lost? And how do I get it back? And I've felt all this over the last week. Hesitations, waves of frustration, the restless feeling of being off. It's definitely humbling and it's profound. And it's not just following a plan when it comes to healing. It really is listening to your body, your mind, your limits. I'm no expert here. I struggle with this a lot. I'm still struggling with this as I speak to you today. And it's slowing down when instinct wants to push, to be patient when your mind wants immediate results. Um, I'm used to measuring progress in miles run or weights lifted. But now I need to reframe how I measure progress. And as I reflect on that, I think it's a lesson for everybody that life is going to throw disruption at all of us. That real skill isn't necessarily rushing forward, it's in recalibrating, listening, and showing up in small intentional ways. And, as I say this, I wrote my thoughts down before this recording. And admittedly, this is stuff that I all really still struggle with. I'm not okay slowing down. I'm not okay feeling like I can't. But admittedly, I've learned a lot about how important it is these last couple of days. And as someone who has a lot of faith, I do have faith that the patience will pay off. If you know me, you know that I like to look good and feel good. As an endurance athlete who trains daily, I need my wardrobe to fit the mold. Roan creates performance-driven clothing for your active lifestyle. Each piece is designed for versatility and made with integrity to outfit you for an active life lived on your own terms. The Roan promise is to help you move forever forward. Use code MILE40 for 20% off online and in-store for new customers only. Visit www.rhone.com, that's Rhone spelled RHONE, or find your local store and move forever forward starting today. So on Wednesday, January 6th, I had my MRI and the results showed disc bulges, a minor herniation. It was at the L5S1, which is the lowest part essentially of your lower back. And the way I was told to think about it was think of the discs like cushions between your vertebrae. Mine are slightly pushed out and one has a minor tear. It's serious enough to demand respect and a smart recovery plan. But the good thing is it's not catastrophic. It's not surgical. And I want to go to this again because I think it's really important that I keep emphasizing this. This whole situation could have been way, way, way worse. And that's what continues to carry my perspective. Um, Navigating the healthcare system has definitely been enlightening. It's not the easiest, and as we all know, there's a lot of room for improvement there. But things like uncertainty about MRI scheduling, the ER wants you out essentially as soon as you're stable. I learned that orthopedists mostly care if you're a surgical candidate, and I found out just 2 days ago that for MRIs, we're still burning CDs, which is wild to me. But as frustrating as it is, it's also instructive, and you learn to advocate, pay attention, and focus on what you can control. Um, Funny enough, I was scheduled to run a 10K before all this happened, and I was supposed to run that 10K today. And after walking comfortably, my mind immediately went to, okay, maybe I can walk this 10K instead. So earlier this week, I was convinced, all right, I'm going to walk the 10K on Saturday. It'll be, the doctor said I can walk, so it'll really be a good a good opportunity for me to test out my progress. But then yesterday morning, I went on a walk with a friend. We were walking up and down a pretty steep incline and decline, and I faced a hurdle. There was a lot of discomfort. The doctors did warn me about inclines in particular. It was nothing. Well, it was a little dramatic at the time, but it was a reminder that progress isn't linear. Healing is measured in small steps and not milestones. And so, I made the decision yesterday to not walk the 10K. And look, it was a right choice, but emotionally, it was heavy. And both truths can coexist. And it's tough because I know on the outside, to those closest to me, they all, I admittedly didn't tell everyone. I did tell Christine, but I didn't tell everyone my plan was to walk the 10K. I know that everyone around me would have told me not to, and I know everyone around me had told me it's not a good idea. But I really struggled, and I do struggle with the imposition of limits, even as I navigate this injury. And so, now reflecting, I'm 1 week in. I've been walking frequently, mostly on flat surfaces. This morning, I walked my fastest mile in 18 minutes, and it's truly elite. I'm seeing another specialist this week. I'm going to be exploring a physical therapist to work with. And sincerely, I want to thank you to everyone who's reached out, not only with recommendations, but for support. It's meant a lot more than I can say. I do strongly feel that this for me is a lot more of a mental hurdle than it is a physical hurdle. I'm confident that I'll be able to work through the physical element of it. But for me, it was definitely a lot more challenging to accept that timelines might shift, that I am going to have to adjust my relationship with some of the things that gave me a lot of nourishment, um, but that there's a bigger picture here. And I know there's more to life than running. There's more than fitness, more than races. But moments like this expose how quickly that certainty can disappear and how much patience, listening, awareness that's required to get you back to where you want to go. I'm committed to coming back stronger, smarter, and yes, faster. And while I haven't shared this with everyone, in fact, most people don't know this, I am chasing a goal. I'm not ready to take it off the list yet. And I am going to work as hard as possible to make this happen. I'm slated to run the Cape Town Marathon on May 24th of this year. I do think it's possible. There's no shortcuts, no guarantees, just intention, focus, and the lessons learned from this past week that reminded me how fragile, how resilient we could be, and truthfully, that comebacks are greater than setbacks. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for being fans of the show, for your support. I hope this episode gave you insight. If you have any questions, please reach out. And thanks again for being part of the Mile 40 family. Thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed this episode of the Mile 40 podcast, go ahead, subscribe, leave a review, and share the word. Thank you for being a part of the Mile 40 family. and let's unite in showing the world that comebacks are always greater than setbacks.